I'm a canine dog. They trained me to track guns, to charge into danger, but no one ever taught me how to survive after losing the one person I loved most. He gave me everything, and on the day of his funeral, all I had left to give was one small thing. I was born behind a rusted gate at the edge of somewhere no one cared to name. Folks called it the yard, but to me, it was a world made of chain-link fences, puddles that never dried, and the hollow clatter of bowls no one ever filled. I don't know how many of us were there, dozens, maybe more, but I do remember the cold. Not just the kind that nips at your pores, but the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you forget what warmth ever felt like. They didn't give us names in that place. We were numbers on tags, lined up like worn boots on a rack. Some came, some left, some never moved again. I was one of the lucky ones, I guess. Strong, fast, quiet. The kind they could use. Not love, no. Just use. I didn't dream much in those days. Mostly I survived. I learned early on that if you bark too loud, they hit you. If you curl too small, they forget you. So I did neither. I watched. I waited. I kept the hurt behind my teeth and the hunger low in my belly. And when the wind blew through the cracks in the shelter wall, I'd close my eyes and imagine it smelled like something better. Wood smoke, leather, even rain that wasn't laced with piss and rust. Then came the day the truck pulled up. It was white, with a badge on the side, and two men inside who didn't smile. They walked past the cages like they were shopping for tools, not lives. When they stopped in front of me, I didn't move, didn't bark, just stared back, silent, steady. One of them, the taller one with lines on his face like he'd seen too many years of things that don't leave, nodded. "This one," he said. "He's got something in his eyes." That was the first time anyone looked me in the face and saw more than fur and teeth. I didn't know it then, but that nod, that moment, was the crack in the wall of my life, the first crack where light could get in. They loaded me up and drove for hours. The road hummed beneath us, and I watched the world blur past through a slit in the crate. Trees, open sky, a hawk riding the wind. I'd never seen anything so big, so free. I didn't dare hope it could ever be mine. We arrived at a place they called Fort Collins. The air there smelled different, cleaner, sharper, like pine and sweat and something old and disciplined. I later learned that scent. Duty. The training yard was where I learned the language of men, the way they move, the weight behind their words, the difference between an order and a promise. I met dogs with scars and eyes that looked past you. Some made it, some didn't. They gave me a name there. Scout. At first, I didn't respond. It didn't feel like mine. But the man who called it, he said it like it mattered. Like I mattered. His name was Frank Delaney, broad-shouldered, quiet-voiced, with a limp in his left leg, and a patience I'd never seen in any human. Frank didn't yell. He didn't hit. He didn't flinch when I growled that first night in the kennel. He just sat outside the gate, back against the wall, reading some worn paperback and tossing bits of jerky into the dirt between us. He never forced me, never rushed me, just waited. Took me 3 days to walk up to him. I didn't lick his hand, didn't wag. I just sat beside him, leaned my shoulder into his, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding since the day I was born. He didn't say a word, just closed the book, reached out, and scratched behind my ear. Gentle, no grab, no fear. That was the first time I knew what it felt like to be touched and not want to bite. Training wasn't easy. It pushed every nerve, every instinct. They taught me how to track, how to signal, how to run toward the danger instead of away from it. I bled. I broke. I got back up. But through it all, Frank was there. Quiet when I needed space, firm when I faltered, soft when I didn't know I needed it. At night, I slept at the foot of his cot, his boots close enough to smell the dust of every place we'd been. And for the first time in my life, I had dreams that weren't about cages or cold, dreams with color, with voices that didn't shout, with laughter. There was this one night, spring maybe, where the rain tapped soft against the tin roof, and Frank was humming some song I didn't know. He looked down at me and said, "You're more than just muscle and teeth, Scout. Your heart. That's what makes you dangerous." I didn't understand the words fully, but I knew the sound. I knew the weight behind them. That night, I moved closer, laid my head on his boot, and closed my eyes. I think that's when I stopped being a tool and started being something else. A partner, a brother, something worth naming. That was the beginning. Not of the missions, not of the battles, but of me, of Scout. And I would follow him anywhere, even into fire, even into death, even into love, though I didn't know it yet. They called it a training yard, but to me, it felt more like a place where dogs were broken in or burned out. Concrete pads painted with fake grass, scent boxes lined in neat little rows, obstacle courses that seemed to rise out of nowhere just to test how much heart a dog had left. And the air, always thick with sweat, rubber, and nerves. But Fort Collins was different from the yard I came from. There was order here, sure, but not cruelty. I could smell the difference. No fear soaked into the ground. No panic in the barking. The other dogs, Rex, Luna, Diesel, they weren't shaking in corners. They were focused. They had purpose. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if I could have that too. Frank didn't train me like the others did their dogs. Most handlers shouted commands, yanked leashes, barked louder than the canines they were trying to control. But not him. Frank watched. He studied the way I moved, where my ears pointed, how my eyes fixed before my body did. He didn't rush me through the drills. Instead, he walked every inch with me, sometimes in silence, like he was letting me lead. The first time I hesitated on the balance beam, a narrow plank suspended a few feet above the ground. Frank didn't coax. He didn't tug the lead or sigh like I was wasting his time. He just stood at the end, hands in his pockets, eyes soft. "Take it when you're ready, Scout," he said. And I did. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to reach him. It went like that for weeks. Every morning, before the sun had a chance to burn the dew off the grass, we trained. Every night we sat under the stars outside the barracks, sharing quiet more than words. He always brought 2 water bottles, one for him, one he poured into a bowl for me. I never touched it until he did. I started to feel it in my chest, something I couldn't name, not hunger, not fear, not even loyalty, something older than all of those, like trust, that had roots deep in the earth. One afternoon, we were practicing scent detection. The setup was simple. 10 identical crates, each with a different item inside. Leather glove, t-shirt, old food wrapper. One of them had trace amounts of gun oil. That was my target. I walked past each crate, nose down, breathing slow. When I reached the 7th, I stopped cold. Not because of the oil, because of something else, something off. The crate smelled wrong. Familiar, but wrong. A mix of bleach and blood, and something sour. I froze. Frank noticed. "You okay, boy?" I didn't move, just stared. He walked over, knelt beside me. His hand didn't go to the crate. It went to my back. "That's not your mark," he said quietly, "but your gut's telling you something. That matters." That was the first time someone didn't correct me when I was wrong. Frank didn't want a robot. He wanted a partner, one who could think, feel, decide. A few days later, we were called into a separate building, a place the younger dogs hadn't seen yet. I knew from the way the older ones stiffened that this wasn't training anymore. The room was small. 2 desks, a bulletin board filled with photos, and a tall man in uniform named Captain Rhodes. His voice had that clipped, official tone, not unkind, just heavy. "Delaney," he said, nodding at Frank, "you've been cleared for active duty. Field assignment in El Paso. Narcotics, high risk. You in?" Frank looked down at me. "He's ready?" Rhodes raised an eyebrow. "He's calm. Reads terrain like a seasoned pro. Fast. Precise. But that dog's only going if you are." Frank didn't answer right away. He looked back at me, like he always did when he was weighing something big. Then he gave one short nod. "We're in." That night, we didn't go to the barracks. Frank took me into town. Small place, diner on the corner, windows fogged with the breath of people who'd been coming there for decades. He tied my leash to a post outside, but I could see him through the window, sipping coffee, talking to the waitress with tired eyes. After a while, he came out with a bag and sat on the curb next to me. He opened it and pulled out a burger, real meat, hot and dripping with grease. He set it in front of me. "You've earned it, partner." I didn't touch it. He laughed softly. Okay. You're gonna make me say it, huh?" He looked around like someone might be listening, then leaned closer. "You're mine, Scout. We ride together from here on out." Then he tore the burger in half and took a bite before pushing the rest toward me again. This time, I ate. And it wasn't just food. It was belonging. 3 days later, we loaded into a truck headed south, the wind sharp with desert dust and anticipation. I sat beside Frank, not in the back, not in a crate, beside him, like I belonged. As we crossed the state line into New Mexico, he reached over and scratched the back of my neck, just under the collar. "You and me, Scout," he said. "We're about to see what we're really made of." I didn't know what lay ahead, the blood, the bombs, the brokenness. All I knew was this. I wasn't running away anymore. I was running towards something. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. The drive into El Paso was long, dry, and quiet, but the kind of quiet that made you listen deeper. Frank didn't talk much on the road. He never did. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting near the window, fingers tapping out a rhythm only he understood. I laid curled on the seat beside him, half asleep, but awake enough to feel the shift. This wasn't training anymore. This was real. I remember the smell of the city first. Dust and diesel, frying oil from a roadside taco truck, old leather seats in patrol cars, and sweat soaked into uniforms. Beneath it all, faint traces of gunpowder and something bitter, something wrong. I didn't know what we were looking for yet, but I could already sense it. We got stationed at a small precinct on the east side of town. Nothing fancy, just brick walls, cracked linoleum, and a break room that smelled like stale coffee and worn-out men. I didn't care. My spot was wherever Frank was. They gave us a corner near the lockers to rest, but we rarely stayed still long enough to use it. Our first few days were all briefings and drills. I listened to the men, detectives, sergeants, beat cops, talk about cartel drops, missing shipments, safe houses tucked behind laundromats and tire shops. I didn't understand the words, but I heard what they really meant. Fear. The kind you wear like a second skin when danger stops being a possibility and becomes routine. Frank kept me close, always. Even when they told him I could stay back for the strategy sessions, he said no. If he's gonna fight beside me, he told the captain, he's gonna hear what I hear. I learned fast where to look, what to sniff, how to read a man's walk before he ever reached for his waistband. Frank didn't need to say much, just a tap on the side, a glance, and I moved where he needed me. But the moment that changed everything came on a Wednesday. It was hot, too hot. The air shimmered above the pavement like it was trying to disappear. We were called out to a rundown property near the border. Tip said it was a drop spot for fentanyl, maybe worse. Frank drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my harness like always. "You ready, Scout?" he said. I thumped my tail once against the seat. The house was silent when we pulled up. Windows boarded, fence falling apart. It didn't look like much. But the moment I stepped out of the car, I felt it. That same wrong smell from the crates back in training. But thicker, meaner. It clung to the air like it didn't want to let go. Frank moved in slow, gun drawn, voice low into the radio. "Unit 4, entering through rear. Scout with me." We breached the back door. It creaked like something alive. Inside it was cooler, darker. Mold on the walls. Mattress on the floor. And there, beneath a pile of laundry, I caught it. Movement, small, heartbeat fast like a bird's. I crept forward, careful. No barking, just breath. My nose brushed fabric, and then I found her. A girl. Couldn't have been older than 5. Eyes wide, face bruised, wrapped in a coat 3 times too big. She didn't scream, just stared at me like I was the last thing she ever expected to see. I sat down, slowly, ears low. She reached out a tiny hand, shaking, and touched my snout. That's when Frank stepped in. Gun still raised, eyes scanning. He saw me, saw her, and everything in him changed. His voice dropped to something I'd only heard in the middle of the night when he thought I was sleeping. "It's okay," he said. "Scout's got you now." He called it in. Backup arrived. They took the girl, wrapped her in a blanket, carried her out like a wounded bird. I followed, blood thumping in my ears. Not from fear, from something else. Pride, maybe. Or the beginning of it. That night, Frank sat on the curb beside me outside the station. He didn't say much. Just pulled out a little photo from his wallet. A girl. Same age, curly hair, big grin. He held it up to the streetlight like it meant more than anything in the world. "My daughter," he said, voice tight. "Used to wear her coat inside out, just to be different." He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. I felt the weight in his chest settle against mine. "You did good today," he whispered. "Real good." And for the first time, I believed it. The next morning, something changed. Frank came to my side of the kennel earlier than usual. No clipboard, no leash. Just him, standing there, hand resting on the gate, like he wasn't sure what to say. Then he crouched, looked me straight in the eyes. "You're not just a K9 now. he said. "You're mine." He didn't mean like property. He meant like family. He filled out the paperwork that afternoon, made it official. My file changed from assigned to partnered. My name was printed next to his on every document that mattered. I had a badge number now, a vest with my name on it, a spot in the cruiser, front seat. That night, when we got home to the small apartment he rented above a hardware store, he let me in without hesitation. I explored every room, the kitchen, the worn couch, the photo of his daughter on the fridge. I curled up on the rug beside his bed and watched him as he fell asleep. The world outside still had monsters, still had nights we'd return with blood on our boots and ghosts in our eyes. But for the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to be chosen. Not because I was useful, not because I was strong, but because someone saw something in me worth loving. And that was the night Scout truly came to life. There's something about a forest at night that makes even the bravest of men quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. It's tight, heavy, like the trees are holding their breath, waiting to see who walks out alive. That night, we were called out just after sunset. A tip came in about a stash house being used by a cartel runner known as El Humo, the Smoke. Nobody knew what he looked like, just that he disappeared into shadows, left trails of bodies behind, and never showed up twice in the same place. Frank didn't hesitate. He checked his gear, clipped my vest in place, and gave me a quick scratch behind the ear. "You smell smoke, Scout?" he asked with a quiet smile. "You bark first." I didn't bark, but I remembered that smell from the first day I got to El Paso. Sharp, dirty, a mix of copper and chemical rot. And now it was stronger. We rolled out in the cruiser, the two of us, like always. The address took us to the edge of town, where the streets gave way to gravel, and gravel gave way to scrub and dry pine. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for our tires as we parked at the edge of a thicket. Frank got out, checked the map, muttered something to dispatch over the radio. I didn't need instructions. The wind shifted, and I caught it. Faint, but clear. Oil, rust, urine, and the unmistakable trace of adrenaline. A scent you never forget once you've tracked it in Men Who Run, because they've done something bad enough to bury them alive in guilt. I led. Frank followed. It didn't take long before the trail broke from gravel to dirt, to something that wasn't even a trail anymore. Just forest floor, flattened weeds, snapped twigs, signs of hurry, signs of fear. We were getting close. I slowed. The air changed. Not cooler, still thick and warm, but tight, like something had pressed its weight into the atmosphere and left it trembling. I signaled, tail stiff, shoulders low, paw up. Frank stopped. "You got something?" I didn't move, just stared ahead, waiting. Then we heard it. A soft click. Not loud, not sharp, just wrong. Frank turned fast. "Tripwire," he whispered, grabbing my vest and pulling me back just as the blast rang out. The world went white. My ears screamed. My legs buckled. I couldn't see, couldn't smell. Just ringing, louder than sirens, louder than my own heartbeat. When sound returned, it was in pieces. A groan, branches falling. My own breath, ragged and fast. Then, his voice. "Scout, Scout, where are you?" I tried to move. One paw worked. The others, numb. My side burned. My mouth tasted dirt and iron. But I found him. Crawled inch by inch until I saw his boots, torn and dust-covered, but standing. He knelt when he saw me. Oh God, boy, you're hit." He touched my ribs. I flinched. Okay. We're gonna get you out. Just stay with me. I tried to stand. Failed. Tried again. He saw it. No hero stuff. Not tonight. That's my job. He wrapped me in his jacket, lifted me onto his shoulder, and carried me through the woods like I was made of something fragile. I'd seen him carry suspects. I'd seen him carry wounded officers. But this was different. He carried me like I was family. When we reached the clearing, backup had arrived. Flashing lights, shouting voices. Paramedics for him. Animal control called in for me. They wanted to take me in a separate van. He refused. He goes where I go, Frank said. He's not just a K9. He's my partner. They tried to argue. One guy even pulled rank. Frank stared him down. Then write me up. I'll sign the damn paper myself. I don't remember the ride back. Just that his hand never left my side. I drifted in and out, dreamless, floating in pain and the warmth of his voice whispering my name. When I woke up, I was on a metal table, stitches in my side, tubes in my leg. The vet tech looked tired, said I lost a lot of blood, said it was close, said I'd probably never work the field again. Frank was sitting in the corner, eyes red, holding my vest in his lap. You scared the hell out of me, he said, but you're still here. That's enough for me. I tried to lift my head. Couldn't. But my tail moved once. He smiled. Still wagging. Tough bastard. They kept me there 3 nights. Frank never left. Slept in the chair, ate vending machine food, read old novels aloud, like I could understand every word. I didn't understand the stories, but I understood the sound of his voice. Steady, low, home. On the 4th day, they cleared me to go. I limped. He didn't care. Retired, he said, rubbing behind my ears. You're officially off duty. No more chasing bad guys, no more explosions, just rest, just life. But I didn't want retirement, not yet. There was still work to do. Still something out there I needed to prove. Not to them, to him. Because when he carried me out of those woods, something shifted between us. I wasn't just his dog, I was his brother. And brothers don't quit on each other. Not while there's still breath left to give. Pain has a scent, not the sharp, sterile smell of blood or antiseptic. I mean real pain. The kind that doesn't bleed, doesn't scab, doesn't heal. The kind you carry deep inside your chest, where no one can see it. That's the scent Frank wore the day the phone call came. It was a Tuesday. We'd just gotten back from a follow-up check at the clinic. I was healing, slow but steady. Still walked with a limp, but Frank said it gave me character. He even joked I should charge more for appearances now, said I looked like an old cowboy with a badge. He tossed his keys on the counter, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and settled into the recliner like he always did after a long day. I curled up on the rug, ears twitching to the hum of the ceiling fan and the soft creak of leather under his weight. Then the phone rang. I watched him answer, listened as his voice changed. Yeah, this is Frank. A pause. What? Another pause. He stood. His hand gripped the back of the chair so hard his knuckles went white. No. Wait. When? Then silence. Long. Still. He didn't hang up. And just let the phone fall from his hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. He didn't move to pick it up, didn't speak, just stared at the wall like it had swallowed the whole world. I got up, limped over, nudged his leg. Nothing. Then I saw it. Just one tear, sliding slow down his cheek. He didn't brush it away. That was how I found out his daughter was gone. Her name was Ellie. I'd seen her picture a dozen times, on the fridge, in his wallet, beside his bed. Blonde hair, big laugh, gap between her teeth she never wanted to fix. Frank talked about her sometimes, but always in the past tense. She used to love horses. She once made me eat a whole burnt pancake so she wouldn't cry. That kind of stuff. He never talked about her mom. I figured that story had too many sharp edges, but this broke something I didn't know could break in him. She'd been driving back from a weekend in Santa Fe, wet roads, a truck jackknifed. She never made it home. Frank didn't go to work the next day, or the day after. He didn't shave, didn't eat. He just sat on the porch, staring out into the street like he was watching for someone who was never going to come. I stayed with him. Didn't ask for walks. Didn't nudge for food. Just laid close. Quiet. Still. He finally spoke on the third night. She was gonna visit, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Said she missed my coffee. Said she wanted to meet you, Scout. He looked at me then. Not past me. At me. You would have liked her. She had that same look you do. Like she didn't trust the world, but she was willing to try. I placed my head on his knee. He didn't pet me. Just let his hand rest on my back. I could feel it. His grief. It came off him like heat from a fire that wasn't burning out. It filled the house, made the air too thick to breathe. At the funeral, I wore my vest. The clean one. Frank asked if I wanted to go. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. I walked beside him as he carried her photo up the aisle. I sat at his feet during the service, eyes scanning the crowd for threats I couldn't define. No guns, no danger, just sorrow everywhere. Afterward, he didn't speak for days. Not to me, not to anyone. I watched him try. He'd stand by the stove like he was going to make coffee, then walk away. He'd put on his boots, then sit down again. I could smell the war in his chest. Grief, fighting rage. Guilt, fighting silence. Then one night, I woke to find him outside in the backyard, sitting in the grass in nothing but a t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, staring up at the stars. I limped over. He didn't move. I was supposed to protect her, he said. He looked down at me. That's what we do, right? We protect. I wanted to tell him he did, that she loved him, that no one can stop rain from falling. But I'm just a dog. I can't say those things. So I did the only thing I could. I pressed my forehead to his chest and stayed there, listening to the beat that told me he was still alive, even if he didn't feel it. That was when I understood. There are some wounds I can't sniff out, some enemies I can't bite, some things I just can't protect him from. But I could be there, and sometimes that's enough. Frank didn't go back to work right away. He took leave, said he needed space, time. He took me on long drives, no destination, just miles and silence. We'd stop at lakes, walk quiet trails, sit on benches while the world kept spinning without us. We didn't talk about Ellie again, not out loud, but she never really left the car. Her picture stayed on the dashboard. Her voice stayed in the music he played when he thought I was sleeping. And every now and then, when he reached back to scratch behind my ear, I felt it in his fingertips, the softness she left behind. I couldn't protect her. But I could protect what was left of him. And in a way, that was her too. After Ellie died, something inside Frank dimmed like a porch light left on too long. He didn't cry much, just once, that night in the backyard. But it was like all the noise in him drained out, and what was left was just silence. Not the good kind. Not peace. Just a hollow stillness that clung to his shoulders like an old, wet coat he didn't know how to take off. He filed his retirement papers a month later. Didn't tell anyone but me. Just sat at the kitchen table, the sunrise cutting a line across the floor, and said, "I think I'm done, Scout." I was lying by the door, half asleep. I lifted my head and stared at him. He looked older than he had just a week before. "You and me, we gave enough, don't you think?" I didn't understand why quitting sounded like a question. The next few days were slow. He packed up the apartment, boxed up his badge, his boots, all the stuff that smelled like purpose. I followed him room to room, watching the walls grow bare, watching him grow quieter. He didn't take calls from the precinct. Let them ring. Let them wonder. I knew the reason, even if they didn't. It wasn't the job that broke him. It was the moment he realized the job couldn't protect what he loved most. He kept me close, closer than ever. We started walking every morning, long before the sun came up. Not the sharp, fast walks we used to take on patrol. These were slow, like he was looking for something he couldn't name. Sometimes we'd just sit in the park for an hour, him on a bench, me on the ground beside him, listening to the wind move through the trees like a hymn. Then came the day they showed up. 2 uniforms, fresh-shaved, wide-eyed. "Sir," one said, nervous. "Captain Rhodes asked if you'd consider consulting on a case. Just one. High profile." Frank shook his head. "I'm out." I could tell by the way the kid's face dropped that the case mattered. Maybe more than most. "Sir, it's kids." That stopped him. "What kind of case?" Frank asked. "Multiple disappearances, 3 in 2 weeks, all under 12. No ransom, no contact, just gone." He didn't answer right away, just looked down at me. I knew what that look meant. He was trying to leave the life behind, but the life wasn't finished with him yet. That evening, he sat on the porch with a beer in one hand and my old harness in the other. He turned it over slowly, like it might bite him if he moved too fast. "I said I was done," he said. He looked at me. "But they're just kids." I walked over and placed my paw on his knee. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just clipped the harness back on me. The next morning, we met with Captain Rhodes in a conference room that smelled like coffee and urgency. He laid out maps, photos, time logs, names of missing children, Lena, Thomas, Eli, all taken from safe neighborhoods, no forced entry, no alarms triggered. No real leads. "What do you need from me?" Frank asked. Rhodes looked at me. Him. Frank's jaw tightened. "He's not field ready. Took a blast a few months back. He's still healing." Rhodes shrugged. "We're not asking him to kick down doors. Just sniff out a trail." Frank hesitated. "You got a scent?" They pulled out a bag. Inside, a pink hoodie, faded, worn, smelled like vanilla shampoo and crayons. I stepped forward before Frank could stop me, nose to fabric. There, a trace, not just the girl, something else. Something dark. Same as the stash house, but colder. I barked once. Frank sighed. That's a yes. We drove up to Silverton that afternoon. Small town. Trees taller than the houses. Flags on porches. The kind of place where neighbors wave and everybody knows who belongs where. And yet 3 kids had vanished without a sound. We started at the last house. The parents were hollowed out, trying to hold it together. The mother clutched a stuffed animal like it was a life raft. The father hovered like a ghost. Frank knelt beside me on the porch steps. "You think you can do this?" I looked at him. No more questions. We followed the scent down the block, across a field, into a trail that led behind the elementary school. I moved slow, methodical. The trail wasn't fresh. Whatever had taken her was smart. Careful, but not perfect. Frank followed close, hand on his sidearm, eyes scanning. Then we found something. Shoe prints, too small for an adult, next to larger ones. Drag marks. We marked the spot. Called it in. The team swept the area and found a buried backpack. Inside, a note. Frank read it out loud. "We take what no one sees, what no one misses." He closed his eyes. This ain't random. We spent the next 2 days chasing ghosts. Trails that faded into pavement. Doors closed with polite smiles, but guarded eyes. This town was hiding something. I could smell it. And then we met him, Mr. Carter, 4th grade teacher, friendly, too friendly. The kind of man who laughs a little too hard, watches a little too long. Frank didn't like him. Neither did I. We visited his classroom. The walls were covered in drawings, kids' artwork, smiles, colors. But in the corner, 3 desks, empty. No photos, no names. Frank noticed. "Those kids transferred out?" he asked. Carter smiled. Moved away. Parents didn't leave contact info. He didn't smell nervous. He smelled like bleach. That night, Frank paced the motel room, laid out maps, connected dots. "He knows something," he said. "He's just clean." I stood up, ears alert. The wind had shifted. We were close. And if Frank was willing to walk away from everything, then I'd be the one to stand up. For him. For those kids. For the kind of justice only a dog can smell in the dark. The town of Silverton looked like something out of an old postcard. White fences. Church steeple. Ice cream parlor with red stools in the window. The kind of place where folks still wave to each other from their front lawns. But behind the shutters and smiles, the air was wrong. Too still. Too clean. I could smell the silence. It's a funny thing the way humans cover their tracks. They think soap and paint and polite words can wash away fear. But fear seeps into walls, into dirt, into clothes left behind. I'd smelled it before. In houses where kids never returned, in trailers where locks had been broken from the inside. And now I smelled it here. The trail led us back to Carter. Mr. Daniel Carter, schoolteacher, 42, never married, no criminal record. Coached Little League once. Frank had seen men like him before. So had I. Not because of their faces, but because of the quiet around them. The way people don't ask too many questions. The way neighbors shrug and say, "He's always been polite." Frank got a search warrant after 2 days of watching. No slip-ups, no outbursts. Carter smiled every time he passed us on the sidewalk. He even waved, but I saw it in Frank's eyes. He knew, and I knew too. We waited until dusk. The house was small, white with green trim. The lawn too perfect. The porch too swept. There was no car in the driveway. No mail in the box. Still, the scent was strong. Beneath the fake pine of air fresheners, beneath the detergent, it was there. Frank gave the signal. I stepped up. The door opened before we knocked. Carter stood there, towel over his shoulder, hands damp. "Well, this is a surprise," he said, voice smooth. Frank showed the warrant. Carter stepped aside without protest. "You mind if I keep cooking?" he asked. "Pasta's almost done." Frank didn't answer. We entered. Every instinct in me fled. Carter's kitchen smelled of garlic and metal. Not blood, not right away. The living room was tidy. Too tidy. Picture frames all perfectly straight. Candles untouched. Furniture arranged like a magazine ad. But behind it, I could sense it. Something buried. I moved down the hall. Frank followed close. There was a door at the end, painted white like the rest. I stopped. Frank paused. "You smell it?" I growled low. He turned the knob slowly. It was locked. He looked back at Carter, who stood in the kitchen, still smiling. "Storage," Carter said. "Old boxes." Frank stepped forward. "Key?" Carter shrugged. "Somewhere around here." Frank didn't wait. He kicked the door once, hard. The frame cracked. The lock gave. The room was small, windowless, and cold. There was a bed. No blanket. No pillow. Just a thin mattress. In the corner, drawings. Crayon pictures taped to the wall. Smiling suns. Stick figures. And on the floor, a sneaker. Pink. Scuffed. Child-sized. Frank cursed under his breath. I didn't bark. Didn't move. The scent was strongest here. He radioed for backup. They cuffed Carter without resistance. He never stopped smiling. "I was just helping them," he said. The chief asked Frank how we knew. Frank didn't answer. He just looked at me. We stayed behind after they took Carter away. Waited for the forensics team. Waited for the parents. I stayed in that room for a long time. Nose to the ground. There were 3 scents. 3 children. I remembered each one. The next day, they found a crawl space under the shed out back. Inside were toys, clothes, and something else. A girl. Alive. Thin, shaking, eyes wide as moons. Frank called out, "We need a medic." But I went in first. She looked at me, frozen, like I might be another lie. So I laid down, ears back, tail still. I didn't move until she reached for me. Her hand touched my fur, and she whispered something I'll never forget. "You're not a bad man." Frank knelt beside me, voice thick. "No, sweetheart. He's the best there is." They carried her out, wrapped in blankets. Reporters came. Cameras. Flashbulbs. And headlines. Hero K9 finds missing child. I didn't care about the headlines. I cared about the way she clung to my harness as they wheeled her into the ambulance. The way she wouldn't let go of my name tag. Scout. That night, back in the motel, Frank opened a bottle of cheap bourbon, poured 2 fingers into a glass, and set a bowl of water beside it. He raised the glass. "To the kid." I thumped my tail. Then he looked at me, eyes soft. "You saved her, Scout. You didn't give up." I rested my head on his foot. I didn't need thanks. But I needed that moment. We stayed there for a while, the 2 of us, the motel room quiet, but not empty. The kind of silence you earn. And for the first time in weeks, Frank smiled. Not a big one, but real. The girl's name was Emily. 7 years old, liked horses, hated green beans, and had a scar under her chin from falling off a swing set the year before. She didn't talk much after we pulled her out from that crawl space. Just held tight to my harness and looked at me like I was something between a guardian angel and a bad dream. We rode with her in the ambulance. Frank sat in front. I stayed on the floor next to the gurney, close enough to feel the weight of her hand resting on my back. The EMTs didn't argue. One of them looked at me and said, "She only calmed down when you came in. Guess you're not going anywhere." I wasn't. At the hospital, they tried to separate us. Said it was sterile protocol. Said I was just a dog. Frank shut that down with one look. "He stays," he said. So I did. They ran tests. Scanned. Probed. Asked questions. Emily didn't answer. She kept one hand on my vest the whole time, fingers gripping like she was afraid I'd disappear. Eventually, she fell asleep. Curled into a ball, IV line taped to her arm, a teddy bear tucked into her side. The bear had been brought by a nurse, but she kept turning back toward me, even in sleep, like she needed to know I was real. Frank and I sat in the hallway most of that night. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor. He wasn't talking, but I knew his thoughts were moving. Fast. "They're gonna try to bury this," he said. "The school, the town, maybe even the department." I looked up at him. Too much heat. Too many people complicit, even if they didn't know it. And we're just a couple of names on a report. He didn't sound angry, just tired. I've seen this before. Truth gets ugly, and people look the other way. I nudged his boot. He smiled, faintly. "But not us, huh?" The next morning, I was cleared to leave the hospital. Frank wasn't. The department called him back, said there was more work to do. They wanted him to testify, go on record, give interviews. He refused the interviews, but he gave them the facts. We spent 2 more weeks in Silverton, helping close out leads. I tracked a second property, an old auto garage Carter had access to. Found toys wrapped in plastic, old snack wrappers, a backpack. That one belonged to Thomas, the second boy. The smell of him was faint, but still there. No body, no blood, just absence. Sometimes absence is the loudest evidence of all. By then, the press had caught wind of it. They started calling me the miracle dog. Frank hated that. "He's not a miracle," he told one reporter. "He's just relentless." I didn't mind the attention. I didn't care about cameras or praise, but I cared about what came next. They wanted to send us home, said our work was done, said it was time to rest. But Frank and I both knew it wasn't over. One night, just after sunset, we got a call from a detective still working the case. A neighbor had tipped off a possible location. Carter's cousin living in a trailer near the woods west of town. The same woods Emily had been found beside. No backup was available. The rest of the force was tied up in meetings, media, containment. Frank looked at me. "I'm not waiting," he said. Neither was I. We drove out alone. No lights, no sirens, just the hum of the engine and the weight of knowing something still waited out there. The trailer was run down, windows dark, no car in the drive. But something felt off. I stepped out first. The air was thick, still. Then I caught it. Fear. Human fear. Sweaty, sharp. from inside. Frank drew his weapon, voice low. "We go slow. You lead." We moved to the side door, half-hinged, rotten at the bottom. I pawed it gently. It creaked open. Inside, it was quiet. A single bulb flickering in the kitchen. Dishes in the sink. A smell of old meat and mildew. And then I heard it. A whimper. Low. Faint. From beneath the floorboards, I stepped forward. Frank grabbed my vest. "Wait, let me clear first." I pulled. He tightened his grip. "Scout, fall back." I looked up at him, and I didn't. I bolted. Down the hall, nose to ground, heart in my throat. I found the hatch under a torn rug, scratched once, twice, then hard. The boards cracked. Frank ran in behind me, cursing, "Damn it, Scout." Then he heard it too. A child's voice. "Help." He yanked the boards free. Below, in the dirt and dust, was a boy. Curled up, shaking, hands tied. Eyes wild with terror. Frank climbed down first. I followed, even with my leg still weak from the old injury. The smell was almost too much. Urine, mold, blood. But the boy, he was alive. Frank cut him loose, wrapped him in his jacket. "You're okay now," he said. "We've got you." The boy's eyes locked onto mine. "You're real," he whispered. I licked his cheek, and for the first time since this whole case began, I felt something close to peace. We carried him out. By then, lights were coming, sirens. Backup. They swarmed the property, cleared it. Arrested the cousin, hiding in a crawl space with a knife and a file folder full of names. They took the boy to the hospital. Frank and I stayed behind. He sat on the bumper of the cruiser, rubbing his face. I laid beside him. "They told us to fall back," he said. He looked at me. "But you didn't." I rested my head on his boot, and neither did he. That night, the stars were out, and for once, they didn't feel so far away. After Silverton, everything moved slower. It wasn't that the world had changed. Bad men still walked the streets. Phones still rang in the middle of the night. Children still went missing in towns that looked too pretty to hide monsters. But Frank and I, we changed. Or maybe we just wore down in the right places. I came back with a limp I'd never quite shake. Some days it barely showed. Others, it dragged behind me like a ghost. The vet said it was nerve damage. Chronic, they called it. Like a word too big for an old dog who just wanted to keep doing his job. Frank didn't push me anymore. He knew. We both did. He took the final badge off his desk a week after we returned. Handed it to Captain Rhodes without ceremony, without words. Just a nod, a sigh, and a handshake that lingered a second too long. "You sure?" Rhodes asked. Frank didn't answer. Because, yeah, he was sure. We left El Paso for good the next morning. Drove west with the windows cracked, and a silence that wasn't sad, just full. Like a song with no lyrics that still meant something. Frank found us a small house in Red Bluff, California. Nothing fancy. A one-story place with peeling paint, a lemon tree in the backyard, and a front porch that creaked when you sat on it too long. It smelled like dust and pine needles and second chances. He fixed the fence that first week. Took his time, measuring each post like it was a blueprint to a life we hadn't lived yet. I watched from the porch, tail thumping softly. Not because I was eager, just because it felt good to be still. We got into a rhythm. Every morning, Frank brewed coffee, real strong, none of that fancy stuff. He'd pour some into a chipped mug, then fill my bowl with water and drop in a biscuit like it was some sacred ritual. Then we'd sit on the porch, watching the street wake up. Mail trucks, joggers, the neighbor's yappy terrier barking at leaves. Sometimes Frank would speak, sometimes not. Didn't matter. I understood the pauses. The nights were my favorite. He'd open the window and let the breeze roll through the screen. I'd curl up beside his bed, and he'd read, always out loud, books about old detectives or soldiers with hearts bigger than their fists. He read like the words were old friends, coming back to visit for a while. And me, I just listened. One night, he looked down at me over the top of his book. "We ever think about what comes next?" I tilted my head. He chuckled. "Didn't think so." But I did think about it. A lot. I thought about the scent of children's laughter and the sound of boots on gravel and the way Frank's hand always found the top of my head after a hard day. I thought about what it meant to grow old, not just in the body, but in the bones, in the soul, to carry memories like medals and wounds like maps. I didn't chase much anymore, didn't run unless I had to. My breath came shorter on hot days, and my dreams sometimes woke me up with whimpers I couldn't stop. Frank knew. He bought me a softer bed, started cutting my food with warm broth, bought dog boots for the winter. "Borrowed time," he said once, ruffling the fur behind my ears. "That's what we're living on." But borrowed time, I learned, is still time. One morning, we took the old trail by the river, the one we walked on days when the air felt less heavy. I moved slower, but I moved. Frank kept pace beside me, hands in his pockets, whistling a tune I didn't know. Halfway through, he stopped. "Scout," he said, real quiet. I turned. He looked up at the trees, then down at me. "Do you ever miss it?" I just stared. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." That night, he brought out the box. Not the food box, not the tool box, the one that smelled like gunpowder and old paper, and the life we left behind. Inside was my vest, the original one, torn, blood-stained, still stiff in places. He held it up. "You were something in this." He looked at me. "You still are." Then he folded it gently, placed it back in the box, and closed the lid. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. We didn't need the vest anymore. We'd done the job. Now we were just two souls on the far side of the story, watching sunsets, waiting for whatever comes after. That night, he dozed off in the chair, TV buzzing soft in the background. I lay by his feet, eyes half closed, ears listening to the rhythm of his breath. It was slower than it used to be, but still steady. I hope mine sounded the same. In that little house, in that quiet town, on that borrowed time. We weren't heroes anymore. We were just Frank and Scout. And somehow that felt bigger than any badge. It was just another morning. Cold, but not bitter. The kind of cold that sat low and soft in the bones, not the sharp kind that bit. I remember the light first, thin, pale, slipping through the blinds like it wasn't sure if it should be there. Frank had fallen asleep in the recliner again. He did that more often those days. The TV was still on, playing some old western at a whisper. There was a cup of coffee on the table beside him, mostly untouched. His boots were off. One sock had a hole in the toe. He hated when that happened. Said it made him feel like he was losing a step. I stretched on the rug, slow and careful. My joints cracked, but not in pain. Just the honest stiffness of age. I walked over, tail swaying once, maybe twice. Nudged his hand. No response. That wasn't new. He was a deep sleeper. I nudged again. Still nothing. So I sat down and watched him. And waited. Minutes passed. The western kept playing. Outside, I heard the mail truck pass. I heard the neighbor's screen door slam. The wind tickled the porch flag until it flapped twice and fell quiet again. But inside, Frank didn't move. I stood, and placed both paws gently on the side of his chair. Leaned up and nudged his chest with my nose. That's when I knew. It wasn't the cold in the air that told me. It was the cold in him. Not a chill, not a shiver. The kind of stillness that doesn't breathe anymore. I sat back down, and I didn't move. Not for hours. Not when the sun came higher. Not when the neighbor knocked. Not when the sirens finally came. They tried to get in the door, but I wouldn't let them. Not right away. I didn't bark. I didn't growl. I just stood between them and Frank, because he hadn't said it was okay yet. It took the old paramedic, the one who'd seen us both during the Silverton case, to kneel down at the porch edge and whisper, "Scout, he's gone, buddy." I knew that. I let them pass. But I followed them inside, watched as they touched him, lifted him, spoke in hushed voices, like their words might stir him awake. I stayed close enough for them to know he wasn't just a body. He was my person. They wrapped him in a white sheet. One corner slipped just a little, and I saw his hand. I walked over, nose to skin, still warm, just barely. I licked it once. Then I laid back down, right where his boots used to rest, and I waited until they carried him out. They gave me the flag later, folded tight into a triangle, handed it to a man from the sheriff's department who said a lot of nice things into a microphone. People clapped. Some cried. I sat still beside the podium, wearing my cleanest vest. Someone had polished the badge on it. It felt wrong, too shiny, too new. Frank wouldn't have cared about the ceremony. He would have cared about the weather, said it was too cold for standing outside, and that the coffee better be hot after. I didn't watch the casket lower, but I knew where it went. I placed something on it before they did. Just a small rubber ball, the old kind he used to throw in the yard. It was cracked, worn, still smelled faintly of pine and sweat and summer. I'd found it in the bottom of the closet that morning. Didn't even know we still had it. It felt right. He gave me everything, and that was the only thing I had left to give back. Afterward, people patted my head, told stories about Frank, called him a hero, a legend, a damn good man. I didn't need them to tell me. I'd known that every day. Back at the house, everything felt loud in its quiet. The floors creaked more. The wind outside sounded lonelier. I waited by the door that night, even though I knew he wasn't coming back through it. Old habits, old hopes. Grief, I've learned, doesn't bark. It doesn't growl or scratch. It just settles in, quiet, heavy, and it stays longer than you expect it to. But so does love. So does memory. I still slept in the same spot that night. I still turned toward the chair, half expecting him to snore or shift or say something half asleep and grumpy. But the chair stayed empty, and I stayed awake. The church smelled like old wood and new flowers. Lilies mostly, the kind that carry too much perfume and not enough warmth. I don't remember walking in. I just remember being there, by the front pew, the leash in my handler's hand, limp and unnecessary. No one was really holding me. No one could. I didn't need to be led. Frank was already there, inside the polished box. I knew it was him. I could smell him, even through the formaldehyde and cologne, even through the fabric of his old dress blues. I could find him. He didn't smell alive anymore, but he still smelled like Frank. They'd dressed him up, not in his uniform, the department offered, but I knew Frank wouldn't have wanted that. He didn't like ceremonies. Said he'd spent too many years saluting flags without knowing who was watching. So they dressed him in his favorite flannel, the soft red one with the elbow patches worn thin, and jeans that still had sawdust in the cuffs. He looked like he might have just fallen asleep in the recliner again. People came. Neighbors, old co-workers, a few from the precinct, wearing stiff suits and sorrow like medals they didn't earn. There was a man from the sheriff's office who read a few words Frank would have rolled his eyes at if he'd been sitting in the back pew with me. Frank Delaney served this country with quiet dignity. He never asked for attention, but he earned respect. I stopped listening after a while. Not out of disrespect. I just didn't need the words. I had the memories. I had his voice in my head saying, "Come on, Scout, let's go." I had the feel of his hand on the side of my neck when I got it right. The gravel in his laugh when I stole his sandwich. The stillness in his breath that last morning. There was a folded flag on a cushion. Tidy. Sharp corners. All protocol. A young officer took it and walked it over to a woman I'd only met once. Frank's sister, I think. She nodded as they handed it to her. Eyes glassy, but dry. She wasn't crying. Not out loud, but her hands trembled when she held the fabric to her chest. They played taps. The room got smaller. The sound echoed into the rafters like something holy and final. I sat straighter, tail curled tight at my side, every muscle still. Then it was quiet again, too quiet. And that's when I knew it was time. I walked up the aisle alone. They let me. No one moved. No one stopped me. I stepped up to the front, to the edge of the casket, and looked down. Frank looked tired. But not in pain. He looked like he'd finished something, like the weight he always carried had finally been set down for good. I reached back gently and pulled it from under my vest strap, the old ball, the red one with the bite marks and the dirt still crusted in the seams, the one he used to toss across the yard, pretending he was training me when really he just liked hearing me run. I placed it on top of the flag, right near his hands. He gave me everything, and that was the only thing I had left. A few people cried then, not loud, but real. The kind of tears you don't wipe away because you're not ashamed of them. I didn't cry. Dogs don't cry the way humans do, but I felt it, deep in my ribs, a heaviness, a hollowness, a space where he used to be. They buried him under a tree in the veterans section of the town cemetery. A big oak stood behind the plot, branches stretching like arms in prayer. I sat beside the grave for a while after the people left, just me and the wind and the dirt that still smelled fresh. I stayed until the sun dipped low, until the chill crept back into my bones, until the ache in my hips reminded me that time was still moving, even if part of me wished it wouldn't. When I finally stood, I didn't look back. Not because I was ready, but because I knew he wouldn't want me to stay too long in sorrow. He used to say, "There's no shame in hurting, Scout, but don't let it anchor you." So I walked home alone that night, past the church, past the houses with porch lights flickering on, past the corner where we used to stop and share a slice of gas station pizza. And when I got back to the house, I curled up in his chair. I watched the stars through the window, one paw hanging off the side like his used to, and I waited, not for him to come back, but for the hurt to become memory, and the memory to become enough. Time doesn't stop. It just slows down in places, like a river hitting a bend. After Frank's funeral, the world kept turning, even when part of me wanted it to pause, just for a moment, to acknowledge the absence of the man who once gave it so much weight. I stayed in the house for a while. People came by to check on me. Some I recognized. Officers, neighbors, the nurse who'd given Frank his last flu shot. Others I didn't, but they all said the same things in different voices. He was a good man. He loved you. You were his world. I listened. I wagged politely. But they didn't know. Not really. He was more than good. He was mine. Eventually, someone from the department arranged for me to be transferred. Not to a shelter, no. Frank made sure of that. His will said I was to go to a canine retirement home upstate, run by a woman named June, who used to handle bomb dogs back in the 80s. She greeted me with gentle hands and eyes that knew how to speak without saying much. "Hey there, Scout," she said. "Been expecting you." The place was quiet, tucked into the hills above Sonoma. Big fields, warm sun, porch swings, a barn that smelled like hay, and old stories. There were other dogs, some limping, some blind, some like me, slow but still listening for a command that might never come. We didn't bark much, didn't need to. There was a rhythm to it. Breakfast at 7, naps in the shade. A walk at dusk when the light turned gold and the world got soft around the edges. June would sit with me sometimes. "You miss him?" she'd ask. I'd look toward the ridge, where the sun dipped low and long. She'd nod. "Yeah, I know." Every now and then, someone from the outside would visit. Kids from the local school, officers from the new class of handlers. They'd run their hands over my fur, wide-eyed, gentle. "This is Scout," June would say. He's seen more than most people twice his age. Sometimes, one of the younger handlers would kneel beside me and ask, "Did you really save all those kids?" I'd look at them, not because I wanted praise, but because I hoped they'd remember that what matters most isn't the saving, it's the staying. One fall afternoon, June gave me a blanket with Frank's old department patch sewn into the corner. Said a friend had mailed it, no return address. I buried my face into it, smelled him again, dust, coffee, leather, home. That night, I dreamed of the porch, the swing, the sound of boots across wooden planks, the soft clink of his keys, his voice low and warm. "You ready, Scout?" And me, younger, faster, standing at his side, always ready. These days, I don't dream as often. The body doesn't let me rest as deep. The hips ache, the eyes blur. But I still hear him sometimes, in the wind, in the hush between sunset and moonrise. And I whisper back. Because even now, after all the missions, after all the noise, it's the quiet I remember most. The sound of him saying my name in the dark. Scout. No medals, no headlines. Just a man and a dog, and a bond that didn't end with death. When my time comes, I hope it's like his. Peaceful, soft, wrapped in memory. Maybe I'll lie down under a tree, like the one they buried him beneath. Maybe I'll close my eyes and hear the click of his boots one last time. And maybe, just maybe, when I get to wherever he is now, he'll be waiting at the gate, hands in his pockets, smile in his eyes. "You took your time," he'll say, and I'll trot up, tail high, head light again, and I'll lay that ball at his feet, one last time, because he gave me everything, and I never stopped being his dog. Not even now, not ever. If you've made it this far, thank you. I know I'm just a dog, but if any part of my story touched something in you, even just a little, just type 1 in the comments. That's all. It lets me know I wasn't the only one who ever felt that kind of love. and that kind of loss. And if you want to hear more, maybe stay a little longer in this quiet place with me, go ahead and subscribe. You don't have to, but I'd sure like it if you did. There are more stories in these old bones. Memories, missions, moments I haven't told yet. But for tonight, I'll lay my head down. And if you're still there when the next story comes, I'll be here too. Good night, friend.